Mark Rosekind, welcome to Daily Drive.
Pleasure to be with you.
You're here as a former board member of the National Sleep Foundation, as well as a highly decorated sleep expert. The National Sleep Foundation has a new study out on the prevalence of drowsy driving among teens. How bad is the situation?
It's already pretty bad. We know from the results of this year's National Sleep Foundation survey that 1 out of 6 teenagers in their first 2 years of driving are already reporting driving drowsy, enough that they were struggling to keep their eyes open. And the reason that's such a big deal is we know adults are at about 60%. So why is there a really important message here is we want to keep that 16% in those adolescents as low as we can so they don't become the 60% of adults who are now drowsy driving on our roadways, right? So this is huge for prevention for road safety.
It's about establishing good habits that they can keep through their adult driving years.
Yes, and we'd prefer if 0 out of 6 were drowsy driving now, but the point is we really want to get the message out, sleep first, drive alert. And if we can do that now, then we'll prevent the future of them as adults still doing drowsy driving on a road, keeping all of us at risk.
It's interesting to me that the teens see drowsy driving as risky, but not as risky as drunk, drugged, or distracted driving. Are they wrong about that?
Yes, and we very often talk about impairment traditionally as 3 Ds. So that's drunk, drugged, and distracted. But really it's 4 Ds, and we need to add drowsy driving as the fourth one, which is just as dangerous and risky as any other of those impairments. And one of the things I like to point out is, not everybody's had a drink before they drive, and they're not on drugs necessarily. Not everybody's on their phone, but everyone who's behind the wheel needs to be awake, and we prefer alert when they're actually driving. And we also know that if you're not getting the sleep you need, all the other things get worse. So all those other impairments actually are worse if you're getting insufficient sleep as well.
Is there any evidence, are teens more sleep deprived on average than they were in previous generations? I mean, in some ways it seems like they have healthier attitudes about a lot of things, but they're young people and they tend to push themselves to the limits. What do you have any sense of that?
Absolutely. And one of the findings from the NSF study is that, the 1 out of 6 that are talking about this, like, what are the reasons? Well, it's school and jobs. And, for all of us, adults included, there's just not enough hours in the day. And the number one thing that people cheat on is their sleep. And to your point, teenagers in particular are getting even more pressure. And so we know both school, including early start times, jobs. Another finding from the study was if you had a job, you were 2 times as likely to be reporting the drowsy driving as if you didn't have the paying job. So yeah, I think the pressures are even higher, both school and work. So we're seeing even more. And of course, I'm sure we'll chat about the other, one of the Ds is distraction. And so of course, cell phones, you think about how they've, just been hugely penetrated our society is really a problem for everybody. And especially when we're talking about our teenagers who are still in their first 1 or 2 years of driving experience, they're even more vulnerable.
Yeah, those findings about jobs really hit home for me. Back in my day, I mean, it was that combination of school and work. I think probably like anybody who's trying to hold down 2 jobs, you're just always tired, and sometimes it's that quiet, comfortable, warm hum in the car that can just put you right to sleep.
And Jamie, thanks for bringing that up because this is a problem for everybody, right? And we're focused on the adolescents, the teenagers in particular, because they're new at driving. But to your point, our whole society is pretty much sleep deprived, which means that we're basically all prone to, in the right environment, like what you just described, to having our brains fall asleep. And so, anybody who's not getting sufficient quantity or quality of sleep is going to be at risk. And I always point out, this really gets people bothered sometimes, but it ends up when you're going 70 miles an hour, having insufficient sleep, that can lengthen your braking distance by 5 feet. So think about it, even 50 milliseconds, which you couldn't even notice, is enough to take you from being what? kind of pissed off about somebody who stops abruptly in front of you to literally being in a crash, right? And unfortunately, too many people both underestimate the importance of sleep and aren't always good judges of how sleep deprived they might be.
Yeah. So the National Sleep Foundation had some recommendations. Of course, get enough sleep regularly, plan long trips with a companion, schedule regular stops. There was also one about being mindful of warning signs and saying, frequent blinking or yawning can be a warning sign. And difficulty with lane and speed control was cited as a sign of drowsiness. And I'm wondering, how do you think about the advanced driver assistance systems, that can help keep a car in its lane or keep you from running into the car in front of you if it's driving slower than you have your cruise control set to?
So, I'm here to talk about sleep and drowsy driving on behalf of the National Sleep Foundation, but we're having this conversation also because I was formerly the administrator of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Yes.
And I say that because your question, again, is so on target, which is the numbers are horrific of how many people's lives we lose on our roadways. Okay. So I'm a firm believer in technology, including those assistance systems. They're going to help you with blind spot monitorings or lane keeping, automatic emergency braking, as which we worked on, very aggressively, et cetera. It's like any of those can help support somebody, right, that is suffering from insufficient sleep and is drowsy while they're actually behind the wheel. So again, I think the technology is great. Now, as you know, a lot of those ADAS technologies can also make people complacent.
Yeah.
And so there is this balance, right, of making sure. The classic to me is blind spot monitors where people just stop looking over their shoulder for things, right? And so, again, I think they can be great advantages, but they're just tools. And we
Yeah.
want to make sure we're doing the right thing, even with support from those tools.
So this teen study was released in conjunction with Drowsy Driving Week, which is going on right now. It always comes in the wake of daylight saving time, at the end of daylight saving time. And that's always curious to me, because isn't this the week that we're all well rested after getting the extra hour of sleep over the weekend?
Well, again, what a great question, because Drowsy Driving Prevention Week comes, you're right after the time zone change in the fall. And it ends up that fall back gets you that extra hour. In the spring, when you spring forward, we actually see an increase in car crashes because everybody's sleep deprived. Okay. So to your point, what we really hope is when people get that extra hour, they actually use it for sleep, and not just stay right, still sleep deprived. But yes, this is the week where you hope they're going to be doing better. Whereas in the spring, we actually see pretty significant increases in crashes for multiple days after the change.